In the previous lesson, we saw how to use the dbBrowse binding type to bring back information from a database. Essentially, we bound the data property of the table to a dbBrowse, bringing back the first name, last name, and email from the customers table, bringing back every single record. There was no filtering here. So I have 599 rows that I brought back from the table. The dbBrowse binding type does allow us to do filtering, where I can add key columns, where I can search for particular records that meet some criteria. So in this case, I have a column in here called Store ID, where the values are either 1 or 2. I have customers in Store 1, I have customers in Store 2. So I've added a drop-down list to my window that has these two options. So you can see Store 1 and Store 2 as options. Behind the scenes, of course, the ID 1 and 2 is what we're going to use in the actual query. So I can go back to my binding here, and I can actually use the Store ID as a key column, so I can filter on it. So I'm going to click on Store ID here, and then I'm going to click on the key to actually use it as a key column. It puts this down here where it says Store ID equals, and then the value. I can hard code the value like putting a 1 here. You see at the bottom it's going to generate a query where it's going to select the information from the customers table where Store ID equals 1. So it's going to filter for that particular criteria. I can still then bring back the first name, last name, and email. I can select those 3 columns. Then it builds that query out for me. So rather than hard coding a value, I can actually link this to a value on the screen. So I can bind this to a property, which is going to be the drop-down selected value. That will then, whatever I selected in the drop-down, will come into my query, making it dynamic. I'm going to bring back the first name, last name, and email. I can also do more than one key column here if I want. I can add multiple at the same time. As soon as I do this and press OK, now it's going to show me 326 rows for Store 1. If I go and change this to Store 2, the query is going to run again, and now I have 273 rows. So I can definitely make a dynamic query using the dbBrowse feature if you don't know how to construct a SQL query.